Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 34, and we're going to talk about fascism, or at least the fascist exercise craze. Exercise is fascism now, I guess. Or perhaps people are just simply projecting onto others their own fascism. Well, so anyway, it seemed to be trending today how exercise is fascistic behavior. Um, so one might even go so far as to say that self-improvement is fascistic. And I think I'll talk about self-improvement in another episode. So the origin of all of this trending behavior is that fitness groups became popular during lockdowns over the last few years, particularly since a lot of governments were going after gyms, places where people can exercise. And people who say, well, I got to exercise. This is how I stay healthy. You're going to say, no, no, this is how you're going to kill everyone. And so people, especially meatheads, and I consider myself a meathead wannabe, uh, there's this sort of mentality where it's like, no, we're not going to do what you tell us to do. We're not going to be pushed around this way. And that's that jock meathead mentality, right? You're going to exercise so that no one pushes you around. And so now here you have people pushing you around. And so a lot of people got upset. They started pushing back against gym bans, right? Bans against gym or shutting down gyms, while at the same time, you have politicians partying and exercising and hanging out socially. So given that hypocrisy, a lot of gyms, exercise places, try to stay open. But anyway, so groups started to form, and then people saw that there were certain fascistic organizations, social organizations that were pro-exercise as well. And then you see people then looking at all of the martial arts, mixed martial arts, fighting, ultimate fighting championships, the MMA, mixed martial arts, all this other kind of stuff, and saying, wow, what's going on here? Oh, this is all part of that same movement. So it's all fascist, right? Because there are a lot of skinhead, white supremacist organizations that love it. And so therefore, this whole genre, this whole pro-exercise, pro-meathead kind of thing is all fascist, which is extremely problematic. So basically, you're saying all of sport is fascist unless you're going to draw the line somewhere, which basically means that even a lot of the trans folks are fascist as well. I mean, no one really seems to take it to that logical conclusion. But really, what's happening is a giant racialization, another racialization or categorization or generalization that's happening. You're going to create a race. You're going to invent a race, fitness fascists, right? And then you're going to give a little few details of how to spot a fitness fascist, and these are bad people. And so essentially social media and corporate legacy media as well, in the space of probably, well, when the first articles came out, it was a couple of years ago, but most recently it took hold, and now everyone is saying, yeah, exercise is somehow fascist behavior. And a lot of this kind of confusion comes as a result of sloppy definitions, right? So a lot of people use the word fascist without really understanding what that word means. People use it to mean stuff I don't like or people I don't like. I'll just call you a fascist, Uh, One might argue that this whole exercise craze is a pushback against the normalization of unhealthy trends, like body image stuff and fat shaming and all this other kind of stuff. But all fascism is government control of private industry. That's it. Government control of private industry. And so all of this other stuff that you see people add on to what might be fascist are either consequences or characteristics that other ideologies have as well. And so it confuses the whole field. But if you go to Mussolini, the Italian fascist, the originator of modern fascism, he basically says, you know, government control of private industry is basically what we're doing here. And we have long had it here in the United States. I forget who wrote it, but there's a book about participatory fascism. I believe that was the name of the book. Um, but he talked about how we're all fascists here in the United States because of the nature of the government, because of the way that the government governs, and it controls pretty much every single industry in the United States through regulations. And if you violate regulations, then your business is no more. I mean, we saw that over the last few years, how the government can basically, on a whim, decide which businesses can stay open and which need to close. I mean, they bankrupt, you know, countless number of businesses that way. And so this is fascism, okay? They control private industry. And when you control industry in this way, then of course everything else falls into place: dominance, nationalism, military force, all of that other stuff. But again, a lot of this, a lot of these other concepts are present in other ideologies as well. And so no one ever bothers to explain it because it just becomes convenient to have it really confused. And so you can invoke it anytime you want. Another aspect of this whole fascist, you know, using the term fascism like it's candy. Well, another two concepts that come up is far right, far left. What the heck is far left and far right anyway? As opposed to right and left. You know, if far right is bad, then right is just a little bad, right? And if far left is bad, then a little bit left is also bad. But if we were to put this in a different way, imagine a piece of paper and you fold it in half, okay? So the left side is left. And then if you go to the edge, that's far left. And then the right side is the right. And then you have the extreme edge, which is far right. Now, there are only two kinds of people in the world, seriously? So this is also a kind of racialization, a generalization. You're going to create a concept, right, far right, and then you're going to give a couple examples and people say, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. But let's face it, there are many people who are both left and right, but we're going to pretend, for propaganda's sake, for, you know, rage creation, we're going to talk about far right and far left as if they are real. But just to give you, just to illustrate how life is far more complicated than this, just simply take that piece of paper that you folded once and fold it again in half. And now if you unfold it, you'll have four squares or rectangles, right? And on one side, you have far left and far right. But what's on the bottom half, right? So the top half, if you have the piece of paper and you folded it twice, and so you have four squares, and the top two squares, let's imagine, as being far right and far left, okay? What about the bottom two squares? What are they? I would argue that the top half would be authoritarianism, how much people desire to control others. And the bottom half are people who really don't care, like, leave me alone, have no concern, no desire to control other people's lives, and just want freedom, right? And so whatever issues that you want, that you like, you can be leftish or right-ish, but whatever, but you don't care. You don't control anyone else's lives, so it doesn't matter. And just by introducing two other political positions helps you to realize this whole far right, far left stuff is nonsense. It's just these terms that are there to make it easy for simpletons and people who are largely ignorant to believe that there is a left or a right. Look, there's a easy way to understand this, that if anyone gives you just two choices, especially two categorizations to explain all of humanity, then there's something wrong here, right? You're being duped. You're being misled. You're being taught to see the world in a way that it does not exist, right? There are no perfect fits for anybody. I guarantee that you can take someone who is so-called far right, and they will have beliefs that fall in line with the far left. Even myself, one might categorize me as far right because of my religious beliefs, okay? But then most of the things that I say openly in class, people would typically identify me as far left. And so what am I? And so here's the problem, right? And so this is the problem with racialization. This is the problem with stereotyping, generalization, categorization that we already talked about in the deconstruction of race. But you ignore details, right? All that matters is the one characteristic which puts you in that category. I mean, think about far right. What if you are one of the protected classes, right? What if you're a colored individual? What if you're a colored female, right? Well, if you're colored trans, what about those people too? And so, I mean, I would imagine that there would be such a thing. To say that there is not would be to make the mistake of all racializations. Now, yelling fascist and then hating someone or something because some other people have called it fascist, that is just basically religious behavior, right? And we talked about how everything is basically religion. So people need to believe in something. You're going to believe in this amorphous, vague concept of fascism. We're fighting fascism. And so I've had lots of students in my classes who they didn't admit it, but I could tell that they, very much supported Antifa and one of these anti-fascists, right? And so one of the questions that was widely circulated was, is it okay to punch a Nazi? And I had one student gladly volunteer, yeah, of course it's okay to punch a Nazi. And so I asked him, what's a Nazi? And he couldn't really define a Nazi. And these days, a Nazi is just someone who someone else fingered as being a Nazi. That's a Nazi. Oh, okay, then I'm going to punch him. But Nazi, if you understand the German language, it's comes from the German Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterspartei, right? And so National Socialist German Workers' Party. And so who wants to say that every single time you want to describe that political group? So you just shorten it with the first two syllables of that long phrase, Nazi, right? Which is the first two syllables of National, right? That's it. So a National Socialist is what a Nazi is. And so if you're a socialist, you're closer to being a Nazi than someone who is free market, which is me, right? And so when I explained how socialism implicates one potentially to become a Nazi, they had to do a gut check, right? It was just sort of a shocking thing for them that they never really understood what they were calling a Nazi. Another term that gets mixed up in here frequently is democracy. And we talked about this before, but it's a very confused form. Communism is democracy, okay? And so it's just weird to me how a lot of people in America keep saying, especially people in the government, keep saying, oh, we got to protect democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic, okay? Representative democracy. And so this is so annoying to me. But nevertheless, so democracy is also thrown around carelessly, just like fascism, just like Nazi, just like many other terms as well. When I first started researching Antifa, right? People kept talking about Antifa. This was a few years ago. So finally I looked it up. And it turns out that it's short for anti-fascist, Antifa, anti-fascist. And so I was like, oh, that's what they are. But then, but Antifa caught my eye because of their violence, because their mindless violence behavior, and where they try to protect their identity by wearing masks. And so in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, they are the fascists and they're calling other people fascist, right? So they're projecting what they are onto others so that you can't call them what they just called you, right? So they call you a fascist and you say, no, 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 you're the fascist. And they say, no, we're not. We're anti-fascist, which is kind of nuts, right? And so people use the terminology to distract from their actual behavior, from actual meaning, and from actual understanding, right? So that people are using words to hide behavior, which is kind of interesting, right? Words, language are supposed to help us and assist us to understand more deeply. And right now, it's being used to confuse issues even more. This is the world has turned upside down, right? Now, the easy way to resolve all this is to realize and to remember that there are costs to all choices. And we started with exercise fascism, and now we're talking about Antifa. But no matter what it is you choose to do today, tomorrow, whatever, there's a cost. And we also said before that legislating morality, that is writing laws and regulations based on what you think is true, hides those costs, right? So this is why socialism is so bad. It hides costs by distributing, the cost of bad choices, of any choice, onto everyone else. So nationalizing healthcare hides the costs of obesity, right? Nationalizing healthcare because it makes everything a standard cost. So no matter how unhealthy your lifestyle is, you still pay the same amount as someone who's extremely healthy, right? And so when you do that, you do not incentivize anyone to get healthy. You don't incentivize food manufacturers to come up with healthier food. In fact, you do the opposite. In America, when they lied about cholesterol and said high cholesterol means that you're going to get fat. And so all the food manufacturers cut out all the cholesterol and replaced it with sugar. Now we have an obesity crisis here in the United States. It's a coincidence, but for sure we know that the whole cholesterol thing was a lie. It was not true. And they only promoted that so they could sell certain drugs to control cholesterol, right? But once you have this misinformation from the government, interfering with people's understanding of health, and then health insurance, all these other things, then we see more unhealthy people in society. And so this whole fitness craze could be the pushback against the government trying to make everyone extremely unhealthy. So the subjective conclusion of this would be that choice is a choice. Consequences are consequences to the choices that we make. And so allowing for more choice or more choices is not fascistic behavior. It's the opposite, right? So fascism basically restricts our choices, reduces the choices, reduces the options that we have. You can't say that something is fascist because it's a threat to your endeavor, your goals, your agenda. That's not what makes fascism fascism. Rather, if you want to distance yourself from fascism and fascistic behavior, you leave people alone. Let people do whatever it is that they want, and you make them pay for their choices. I am perfectly willing to pay for all of my choices, right? And so just leave me alone. Let people be free. One has to be able to make the choices that you think are best for you, and then you take responsibility for those choices. If the popular common sense healthcare and health regimen doesn't work for you, then you're free to figure out what works better for you. I mean, I think the whole gluten allergy thing happened as a result of people trying to figure out why their health is so bad. And so we have to realize that there is rarely, if ever, a one-size-fits-all solution to everything everywhere. And so if exercise is what you want to do, then go do it. If you don't care about exercise, then don't exercise. But there are consequences for all choices. Let people figure out what they're willing to live with, and then leave them alone. That's it for today. I will see you in the next episode.